Smoke drifted above a frozen clearing. A line of German women prisoners stood beside metal barrels filled with fuel. Snow cracked under their boots. The wind pushed the flames sideways. Each woman held a folded uniform that carried the smell of barracks, marches, and a war that was ending around them. Allied soldiers watched in silence. The women looked at the cloth in their hands. Some stared ahead, some trembled. Others blinked fast, as if trying to understand how a uniform could hold both identity and guilt. When the order came, the uniforms dropped into the fire. Buttons snapped in the heat. The flames climbed higher. The women did not move. They watched part of their past turn to ash. Germany in early 1945 was collapsing from every direction. The Soviets pressed in from the east with massive artillery, tanks, and infantry. The Western Allies crossed the Rhine and moved deeper into German territory. Air raids struck transport lines and cities. The German command struggled to keep units supplied. Communications broke down across multiple fronts. Food grew scarce as distribution systems failed. Hospitals overflowed with wounded soldiers and civilians. Women served across the German war machine. By 1944 and 1945, more than 500,000 German women had been placed in auxiliary positions. They worked as signals operators, clerks, nurses, dispatch riders, and anti-aircraft assistants. Many belonged to the Luftwaffe Auxiliaries, or the Wehrmacht Female Signals Corps. Some worked near front lines. Others operated inside command bunkers, training stress, discipline, and loyalty. Uniforms became symbols of duty. The regime used them to create identity and structure. As German defenses weakened, thousands of women auxiliaries were captured. They were processed under the rules of the Geneva Convention. Allied forces separated them from combat units and created controlled camps. Conditions varied. Some camps were overcrowded, others were orderly. Most were cold and tense. The women arrived with few belongings. Many carried their uniforms stitched with insignia. These insignia linked them to the Nazi military system. Allied officers understood the political weight of these symbols. They viewed them as tools of propaganda that had supported a violent regime. The order to destroy uniforms appeared in several areas as the war moved toward its final stage. Allied authorities wanted to prevent uniforms from being reused, hidden, or circulated. They also wanted to remove symbols that could encourage loyalty to the collapsing government. In some camps, the process happened quickly. In others, it unfolded under careful supervision. The women were told to hand over their uniforms or destroy them on sight. The burning of uniforms removed material that carried political value. Human reactions inside the camps varied. Some women had joined auxiliary service by requirement, not ideology. Others believed in the regime and felt the order as a personal blow. Fear of Soviet captivity pushed many to choose surrender to Western forces whenever possible. Inside the camps, some looked at the fire with relief. They felt that the burning closed a chapter they no longer wished to defend. Others felt humiliation. The uniform had shaped their identity for months or years. Losing it removed structure and certainty. Younger auxiliaries often struggled to understand what was happening around them. Many had entered service at 18 or 19. They now watched the last symbol of their role disappear. Tactically, the uniforms held importance. Allied forces worked to control German military remnants. Uniforms stored in camps posed risks. Some German prisoners attempted escapes by using insignia or leftover cloth to deceive guards. Destroying uniforms reduced confusion. It ensured that no reorganized units could gather inside or near the camps. Allied command also wanted clear separation between active military structures and prisoners. Removing uniforms marked that division. It allowed guards to manage large groups more effectively. It also helped intelligence teams focus on individuals rather than insignia. Many women had worked in communications and operation centers. Some held information about code systems, radio channels, or command routines. Stripping the uniform helped interrogators reinforce that the war environment had ended. Technologically, the uniforms carried details that mattered in Allied investigations. German auxiliary uniforms had specific patches that indicated rank, specialty, and unit ties. Some insignia led intelligence teams to detect patterns in communication networks. Certain Luftwaffe badges pointed to radar operations or flak batteries. Allied analysts collected samples before destruction to catalog these patterns. They used them to map parts of the German air defense system. Uniform buttons sometimes included manufacturing marks. These marks helped track supply chains inside the collapsing German economy. Once documentation was complete, destruction followed. The goal was to prevent any circulation of materials that could help reorganize resistance. The enemy perspective at that time revealed deep turmoil. German commanders understood that many auxiliaries would be captured. Orders from higher offices told women to hold positions until replacements arrived. In reality, replacements never came. Communications were too broken. Supply lines had collapsed. Some commanders told their auxiliaries to flee west. They hoped surrender to British or American forces would offer better survival chances. Others tried to keep discipline. They claimed the war could still turn. As the camps formed, German officers lost contact with their women auxiliaries. Reports of uniform destruction reached some units and caused anger. They viewed it as a symbolic erosion of the military order they depended on. The regime had built social identity around uniforms. Losing them stripped away the appearance of control. To many within the German system, the act signaled that the war's end was irreversible. The turning point came when Allied units overran several German command regions in rapid succession. In early April 1945, British and American forces captured large clusters of communication centers where women auxiliaries operated. Trucks moved groups of prisoners to temporary holding sites. At these sites, Allied officers issued orders to secure all materials linked to the Nazi state. The uniforms became targets for immediate processing. In some camps, several hundred women stood in lines holding their uniforms. Allied guards placed barrels in open areas. Fuel was poured carefully. The order was direct. Every uniform with Nazi insignia had to be surrendered or burned. Many women hesitated. Some held the cloth to their chests. Others stepped forward quickly. The fire spread across pile after pile. Buttons cracked, wool curled. Smoke mixed with cold air. The process lasted hours in larger camps. Allied officers walked along the line and checked compliance. Piles were stirred with tools to ensure full destruction. In several camps, interpreters explained the purpose. They told the women that the uniforms represented a military system that no longer existed. The instruction was not meant as personal punishment. It was meant to secure the area and prevent misuse. Many women understood. Some accepted the explanation quietly. Others looked away. As the war closed, these scenes repeated. At one camp in northern Germany, more than 400 women auxiliaries watched their uniforms burn in a single evening. The flames lit their faces. Some covered their eyes. A few whispered prayers. The guards kept a steady distance. They documented the destruction. They wrote reports detailing how many uniforms and insignia had been collected. Intelligence officers marked units of origin. They traced which commands each group had served. The information supported postwar investigations. For some women, the burning carried emotional impact. The uniform had provided structure. Losing it left them unsure of their future. Many did not know where their families were. Cities had been bombed. Transport lines were destroyed. Letters rarely arrived. The fire signaled that they now existed in a world without the institution that had shaped their recent life. For others, the scene brought a sense of closure. They felt that the uniform kept them tied to a system that had collapsed under its own violence. Watching it burn allowed them to step into a new reality. The aftermath spread across Germany within weeks of surrender. Millions of German soldiers and auxiliaries entered captivity. Among them were thousands of women who no longer held uniforms or insignia. Camps separated prisoners by role and security level. Allied authorities processed women for questioning. They recorded their service history. Many reported routine duties, like typing, filing, or operating switchboards. Others had worked near radar systems or transport coordination. These interviews fed intelligence databases that shaped the early occupation strategy. Losses from the collapse of the German military system became clear. Infrastructure was destroyed. Communications were fragmented. Medical services were strained. Many former auxiliaries helped rebuild basic systems under Allied supervision. They translated documents. They identified former colleagues. Some assisted in locating stored equipment. Others worked in hospitals or relief centers. The destroyed uniforms became part of a larger dismantling of the Nazi state. Removing symbols reduced the chance of hidden cells organizing as the occupation began. Strategic changes followed. The Allies focused on denazification across all sectors. Visual symbols like uniforms, flags, posters, and badges were removed from public view. Items found in private homes were often confiscated. Schools, offices, and factories were inspected. The goal was to prevent the return of militarized ideology. Former auxiliaries faced background checks before they could work in administrative roles. Some passed quickly, others faced restrictions. The destruction of uniforms at the camps had signaled the start of this process. It marked the shift from wartime operations to reconstruction. The psychological aftermath for the women remained complex. Some carried guilt for serving in a system that caused widespread suffering. Others defended their service as duty. Many tried to distance themselves from the regime. Public opinion inside occupied Germany shifted rapidly. Civilian populations focused on survival. Hunger increased. Housing shortages grew. Former auxiliaries worked beside civilians with little attention to their past uniforms. The fire that had consumed their cloth became a memory tied to the moment when everything changed. The world learned from these events that symbols hold power during war. Uniforms shape identity. They signal loyalty. They can influence behavior. Destroying the uniforms removed a visible link to a fallen system. It helped control transition during a fragile period. It created space for reconstruction. The women who watched their uniforms burn saw the end of an era. Their experience showed how quickly structures can collapse when military and political systems lose stability. The scene remains a reminder of the human impact inside large conflicts and the weight carried by simple cloth when it represents a nation at war.